It occurred in Tai Po Town, Hong Kong in 2013. I wouldn't say exactly which hospital and which district it was in, because I was still working there. It was my second year working in this hospital, and I had grown accustomed to the job, so my working attitude became sluggish. I was hiding in the corner of the stairs one afternoon to smoke a cigarette when I heard a nurse call my name. "Dr. Jen, I have a patient who requires surgery." It turned out that a patient had just been taken to the emergency room with an injury that required immediate surgery. At the time, I wasn't the primary surgeon, but I was also a doctor. I didn't dare to ignore it at that time, so I immediately threw the cigarette butt away and dashed into the operating room with the nurse. I was a step behind schedule, and the patient was ushered into the emergency operating room. The treating doctor didn't even reprimand me, he simply told me to disinfect and get to work. I packed my belongings and rushed to the surgery room, and it was only then that I noticed the patient's wound. The patient had a severe wound, with the lower half of the arm completely gone. Despite my limited experience, I could see that the wound wasn't cut, that the arm had been completely ripped off by some force. This type of injury was uncommon, and it was also the most difficult type of hand surgery in which I had been directly involved. The surgery took more than 5 hours to complete, and we did our best to treat all of the nerves and blood vessels in the patient's wounded arm. When I arrived at work the next day, the patient had awakened, and I had learned about his condition during the sessions. "How did you get injured like this?" I inquired. To be honest, I didn't care how his injury occurred. When he came to recall the reason, he had a terrifying expression on his face, as if he was hesitant to tell. His family lived in a rural suburb, a small fishing village by the sea, he said. While many people in the village relied on fishing for a living, his family was an exception. They relied on farming to support their family. Because there was a lot of arable land in the village, he told everyone in his family to clean up to start planting, and his family agreed. So, during this time he plowed the land, digging for many years without planting anything, and he was extremely tired, but he felt happy. He was digging in the ground the other day when he came to a halt with a stunned expression. He turned over his pickaxe and saw that it was a human skull, and half of it was rotting. Although this was not a good omen, he didn't take it too seriously because his ancestors had lived here for many generations, so the ground had buried a few dead people. Furthermore, those bones had been here for more than a dozen years. The ghost had long since reincarnated, and he threw all the bones he dug out on the grass at the field's edge. After a while, many more bone fragments were dug out one by one, but they were all broken up. When he finished digging, there was already a pile of bones lying there, and it appeared to be quite complete. He didn't think it was good to be seen by others, so he returned home after burying the bones. He lived in the westernmost part of the village, away from other people's homes. All of the family's children worked in the city, and he was the only one who lived here alone. He was tired all day, so he went to bed early and fell asleep without noticing. He was awakened unexpectedly in the middle of the night by a knock on the door. The sound was becoming increasingly louder as if someone outside was knocking on the door. Whoever came to the door at this hour astounded him. Just as he was about to get up, the door of the room was violently opened. At the door, a shadow appeared. He inquired several times, but the shadow did not respond, and instead entered the room very naturally, as if it were a place devoid of people. As it got closer, he realized it was an old man dressed in antique clothing who looked very scary. But the old man only had one arm and shouted at him as he approached. The old man asked him to give back his arm because he had lost one, but this was a ridiculous request. The old man reacted hastily. Maybe today the skeleton he discovered in the ground had come to haunt him. Perhaps he lost a portion of the old man's arm while digging up bones. However, his bones were also discovered in a state of disarray. The old man walked over to the bed and grabbed his arm before he could react. He was not sure how skinny old man could be so strong. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his arm, and the elderly man with extraordinary strength yanked his arm away. The old man ripped his arm off and caused him great pain. The intense pain and fear caused his mind to go blank, and he couldn't feel anything. Then he passed out. When neighbors heard the screams, they discovered that he was injured badly and took him to the hospital. He had no idea where the ghost had taken his arm. The neighbors searched for a long time but were unable to locate it. After hearing what he said, I was speechless. I thought he was maybe suffering from a mental illness, so I summoned his son and told him to look after his father, fearing that his self-harming behavior would interfere with the treatment. But I could tell his son was uninterested in what I had to say because he believed his father's story was true. I didn't think it was necessary to say anything else, so I went back to my business that day, thinking I'd find out later. Then his son came to tell me that he had returned to the village to check on his father's request. Sure enough, his son discovered the small mound that his father had built. Then he dug it up to double check and was very careful in doing so. His son saw the scattered bones as his father described them, and he did not lie. The son simply put the bones together out of curiosity, and it turned out that a piece of arm bone was indeed missing. What was more terrifying was that his son discovered in that grave the piece of his father's arm that had been rotting with maggots. Only then did his son fully believe his father wasn't lying, and that the unjust spirit had ripped off his father's hand.